Cool. You should be recording now. So welcome everyone. It's good to have you all here. Today we have a special guest, John Hyunh. He is a cybersecurity compliance expert. He's just joined us for this mentoring session. So the focus for today is going to be mostly around compliance for the first part of the mentoring session. So if anyone has any questions related to compliance policies and so on and so forth, John is probably one of the best people to answer all those questions you might have. So I'll just jump to the next slide. Please let me know if you can see the next slide, which is the agenda. Okay, cool. Awesome. So yeah, quick intro. So for those who haven't joined before, this is a fortnightly mentoring session that we host, hopefully answering some of the questions you might have with regards to cybersecurity and everything and anything that has to do with cybersecurity, cybersecurity careers, and so on and so forth. Today, as I said, we're going to have a chat with John, who's a cyber compliance and governance expert. So he's going to talk a little bit about GRC, and then we can open the mic for you guys to ask any questions you might have, because last time we talked about it, and there were quite a few questions around compliance. So I'm like, let us bring a specialist to talk about it. And then we're going to jump into the homework that we did based on last week exercise or last session, and some practical exercise for us to go through together as well, just to get the juices flowing with regards to things we do in the cybersecurity space, the day-to-day of a cybersecurity professional, and so on and so forth. So a few house rules. So since we're a large group, if you guys can keep your mics muted whilst people are speaking, that would be great. If you can raise your hand, if you have any questions, just click the button to raise your hand in case you have any questions, and we'll follow the order of your hands being raised. We're recording this session and posting it on YouTube for those who cannot attend. I know there is a large mix of people from different parts of the world. So, but let's focus on keeping this in English only. Don't be shy if like we're not here to judge your knowledge or anything like that. I think the idea is to promote discussion. So if you have a question, do not hesitate to ask the question. And if you do not feel comfortable in speaking, just send your question via chat. We're going to try to go through all questions and comments that you have on the chat itself. And last but not least, let's try to make it fun. So this should be a relaxed environment for us to learn and discuss and yeah, hear from the experts. And today we have John. So without further ado, John, I was about to introduce yourself, but I will let you do it yourself. I think that's better. So let me hand over to you, John.
Thanks, Adri. Thanks for everyone. Thanks for joining, everyone. I managed to catch up with Adri, I think, last week, and had a quick chat with him after I saw a feed on my LinkedIn profile. I think it was your first mentoring session there, and I was clicking on one Friday night, and I was just watching the whole YouTube, and just listening to you guys talk about GRC and compliance. I go, okay, that's something I can talk about within this group, and just to let you know what I do and all my experiences, what I've done with my current role and my previous role. So basically, I've been in the IT industry for over more than 10 years now, and I haven't really just started on GRC. It's more of a progression, probably more prominently in the last, say, 3 years since I've been at Telco Authority. Probably I'll be doing a lot of IT stuff. I start off the help desk and application support, moving on to more of a practice lead within the industry, and gradually moved into GRC, where I currently sit with Telco Authority. So that's kind of where I've progressively moved into the actual role. Like I didn't really start off or even had any intention to actually land a role in GRC, but it just happens. So within the IT and cyber industry, you're always moving. You're not really on the one set a position. When you actually, once you get into it, you notice that you will gradually move on to other roles as you progress. So that's something that you can take once you get into a role that you're comfortable in, or if you're trying to land that first cyber role. I would just say just get in a position first, like whether it's an application or desktop. You will notice that there are a lot of correlating features or skill sets that you will pick up that will lead you down that path. Okay, so that's a bit about me and what I've done, but let me just jump on to GRC. I'm not gonna, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is pretty much what GRC is. I'm not gonna go into the theory stuff too much. So basically GRC, it's just what the organization manages in risks and compliance, rules and regulations, how we can actually meet those requirements. With our GRC, it's different within industries. So if you work for government, you would have a lot of compliance and regulations. Where you've worked for the finance industry or food industry, you'll notice they'll have their own set of rules and compliances. So depending on which industry you actually will fall into, it's all different. Okay, so but the underlying concept of it remains the same. It's just that you'll be looking at other focus, more specific requirements within that industry. So let's jump on to the next slide, Adri. Yeah, so in terms of governance, risks, and compliance, this is pretty much what each one represents. So from a governance perspective, you're looking at more the processes and structures from top level down, and that gets filtered down within your organization. And the reason why you do that, you can just to say that for good governance, you can actually promote good ethical behavior, and you actually prove that within your organization when you do that. Risk management, on the other hand, it involves identifying the risks. How do you deal with it? How do you prioritize it? And how do you monitor it on an ongoing basis as well? Compliance, basically, it's making sure you comply with all the rules and regulations of the industry that you actually kind of work for. So as I said, finance, government, it will have its own set of rules and regulations. So that's pretty much from a theoretical point of view what that does. I can answer any questions a bit later on towards the end of when I actually present a bit more what I currently do. So currently with my role with telco authority as well, we look after the radio networks within New South Wales. So all your ambulance, police, firemen, all that communication when they're out on the field. So all your, when they're out in the field, they have radios which they hold, and they can communicate with each other when they're on the field. So all that infrastructure, all those communications is what we manage within the whole state. So it's quite a large network that we actually manage. So from a compliance and GRC point of view, there are a lot of rules and regulations that we have to look after, being critical infrastructure. So, for example, we've got what we call the SOCI Act, what we call the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act. They have a lot of requirements in there that say from a government level we must comply with. So I won't go through all the controls and all that. It's just a bit too much. But what I want to alliterate is that when you do GRC, you gotta understand the concepts behind it. So a lot of the policies, if you're not writing policies, you need to understand, do you have those policies, and also how do those policies affect your organization? So you got policies, you got standards, okay, and you also got guidelines as well. So guidelines are a bit more of a as I said, pretty simple guidelines how to do things. Okay, so policies and standards are probably the most important, you would say, when you do within a GRC space, because you're always referring to a document or a policy. If you're not writing it, you got to make sure that you are complying with it. I can give you an example. Even recently, just like yesterday, we've just finished our ISO audit. It has we've done that for 2 weeks, but over 5 days. Okay, so basically I've sit down with the auditor and they come through your organization and they audit you based on a particular standard. So this one was ISO. So it was a lot of like information system management requirements that we do. That took about 2 weeks, and they've gone through a lot of our controls. They've gone through all our policies and standards. Do we have all those documented? Where is it stored? How is it secured? You need to provide all those details, document it, and actually demonstrate it, how you actually do it. Adrian, do you have a question?
I do indeed.
Yeah.
I would like to hear your opinion on policies, John. So this is a question I get asked quite frequently. So is a security policy something aspirational, as in you write a policy that you want to perhaps align yourself against, or what's behind the motivation or the reasoning when you write a policy? So is it a document that you aspire to achieve and be aligned with the policy, or does it reflect the current state of your organization, or is there anything else behind it?
Yeah, so the policy, why would you write a policy? So the policy will dictate the direction of the organization. So the reason why, from a very high level, that gets filtered down. So you may have a policy like an information security policy. Why would you have that? You could say that within that policy, you may have a requirement where all data within your organization must be encrypted, something like that, for example, and then you filter that down within the organization. And it does relate to a control that you will need to fulfill, whether it will be ISO related, whether it will be like an Essential 8 requirement, something like that. It always will link back to a control or a risk that that you may have within the organization. So, okay, so they all relate to some kind of control or risk. So that's the reason why you would have to have that policies or even standards in the back. You don't just write a policy to say, we want to do a particular function because we need it. Okay, there's a reason behind that. Okay, so whether it's a compliance point of view, but it will always link back to a risk or a control within your organization. Hopefully that gets that you can understand that a bit more. If you don't, I can happily answer.
100%, John. So I think the important words that you mentioned there as well is, apart from compliance, right? So compliance is basically someone telling you, you must do this to operate in this space. And that's where regulations come from.
Yeah.
And so those are non-negotiables in a security policy. And correct me if I'm wrong, John, I'm just sharing a bit of my perspective. But anything else that goes into a policy is based on risk, right? So what's the risk appetite of the organization? And if something goes beyond that risk appetite, or if it's in breach of a compliance, then you need to have a clause in your policy that addresses that. So I'm going to use a very silly example. And again, John, jump in if I'm wrong or if you have something to add to it. But for example, do not leave your luggage unattended. Let's say you hear it at the airport, right? So what's the policy behind it, right? So the airport might have that policy because they are afraid of people dropping a bomb or something like that. But you personally quite rarely will have the appetite to leave your luggage unattended anywhere, anyways, right? So uh, that's risk management, right?
Yeah,
So sometimes people do not realize things, I would say, or they're not aware of the risk. Therefore, you need a policy that tells you what to do. But I would say most of the time it's aligned to risk appetite and compliance.
yeah. So absolutely, as you hit the nail on the head there. So yeah, so with risk itself, with GRC, why you don't actually, most organizations, particularly large ones, will have their own risk team, but that doesn't mean necessarily you don't deal with risks. Okay, so with risk itself, you do need to identify risks, assess the risks, and prioritize those risks. Okay, so um, from a compliance and governance perspective, when you do audits, when you do internal audits, you do ISO audits, you do Essential 8, even like pen testing, a lot of these requirements, you tend to find a lot of issues, even risks that comes out of those reports that you get. And what you do with those risks is you got to actually obviously identify and actually assess it and track it. Okay, so you need to have some kind of mechanism where you're on top of those risks and you know those risks are out there, because that's when you get audited, they will look at the auditor will look at how you manage these risks and what you're doing with it. So that's something that you do need to keep in mind when you do a lot of GRC. You do also have to have that risk mindset and how to do it. You doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an expert in risk management. It's just that these are the I guess skill sets that you do need. At least you can identify it. And also you need to obviously have mechanisms where you can manage those risks, like having if it was a high risk, what mitigation strategies can you think of to address that particular risk, particularly if it's like a really severe risk. Okay, something that a pen tester might have found within your environment. Then how do you address that, Adri?
Yeah. No, excellent points, John. So we have we have 8 minutes to go. Is it okay if we jump to questions and see if people have any questions as well?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Up for
I didn't
questions?
mean to cut you out, but
No,
I'm
no,
just
that's
conscious of
great.
time.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Cool,
Questions.
awesome. So we've received a few questions online,
Okay.
which I share on the screen. So let's go through those first, and then if anyone in the audience has a question, please raise your hand and John will answer that question for you.
Okay, so how do I break into GRC? So, as I said, with IT, it's you're not always sure where you'll end up. So I started my career within the IT industry, starting with the simple stuff of desktop support, application support, then on to practice lead, and I've basically done a lot of support work and also a lot of controls and governance work. with previous organizations. So it's not really if you get into IT, like even within an area of IT, you can move into it because, for example, in my previous role, I was a practice lead in implementing controls for identity and access. Okay, so it doesn't really translate to a GRC role, but when you look at the reasons behind that, for example, you kind of looked at, it relates to ISO 27001, all these other standards that you don't really know that why you've been working on it. You don't really know the reasons behind why you do that. Okay, so I guess if you get a chance to get into any IT role, you will learn a lot of skills, not technical, but a lot of process-driven skills. Okay, so to get into GRC, I suggest get into any role in IT, and you will pick up stuff that you probably won't know why you're doing it, but there is a reason why you perform a particular function. It will closely relate to a GRC function or control in the background. How I got my current role is I was doing some application support work in my previous role, and I just saw this role that I saw on the Seek and said, okay, yeah, I do all these functions. I've got that, and I just applied for it, and I landed into this role. But it's kicked up the GRC component of it. Actually kicks up a lot when you go into it, because you will learn a lot, and you will discover that there are stuff that you don't necessarily know, but you can pick up real quick. Okay, so that's in a sense how I would get into it. Like, get in the IT role, do that, understand the concepts of what you're doing there, and then gradually you'll see you've got the opportunity. You can jump into a GRC role. I did recall. I think I can't remember who it was in your first session. There was a gentleman who was an auditor who wanted to jump into cyber, I believe. That is a good skill. If you're an auditor and you wanted to actually jump into cyber, your skills as an auditor is you would make that transition a lot easier, because when you get into GRC, you will notice a lot of your skills are really you will notice your skills. It will be a lot easier for you to transition, because if you're not getting audited by an auditor, you are doing the auditing within your organization. So you're making sure your organization complies with these rules and regulations. You're making sure that you've got policies and standards, you're documenting all that. So if you have that skill set, for example, it's a really easy jump for you to do. So just keep it that. So that's my aspects of it. Adri?
Yeah, so we got quite a few questions from Edilson here. There are 5 questions. I don't think we're going to have time to go through all of them. So Edilson, I'll pick 2 of them for John. So
Awesome.
can you describe a little bit about Can you describe a little bit about your day-to-day in this role, John? What do you do? What does your day look like? Okay. And also, what are the pain points at the moment in this role for you?
Okay.
Very good questions, by the way. Thank you, Edilson.
Okay.
No worries. Thanks, Shia, guys.
Thank you. So day-to-day, for me, I look at the current controls that we have within our organization. So from a policy and compliance point of view, we've got to make sure that we have the policies and standards in place. If not, then I'll go out and either write one myself or look at how I can actually implement that in the organization. Apart from that, with all the policies and standards that we do have, we've got to make sure that we as an organization follow those policies and standards. So we kind of look at from a within our organization, we look at those policy and standard, and we got to vet, do we I guess we say, do we follow the rules and standards that we've actually put down in our policies? So you got to actually, in a way, audit your little organization to say that, are we doing this? If not, why aren't we doing it? We also do a lot of risk assessments as well. So with risk assessments, I risk assess our vendors. Okay, so we've got, for me, I think from memory, I audited about 80 plus current vendors. So when I say audit, I order them based on a cyber assessment I created based on ISO 27001 and NIST. So a lot of the controls and standards within the industry, I put up a questionnaire and I'll send them out to our vendors, and they got to answer those questions to say, you know, how compliant they are from a cyber perspective. You know, if they come back and say, we don't do this, or we have this, we don't do that, now that's when I risk assess them and say, okay, if you don't have this, what and how are you mitigating this risk? Because, you know, if we do find out they don't comply to the standards of New South Wales government, then that's when we have to raise a risk, and we've got to look at other measures on how to deal with that. Because when we look at critical infrastructure from New South Wales, we take that highly, we take that real quite serious in the way we look at that. As I said, we've gone through audit recently, just finished yesterday. So the auditor will come into our organization. They will audit you based on a regulation or compliance component. So in this case, it was ISO 27001. Okay, so what the auditor will do is he'll come in. There's two parts to it. They will look at your physical office where you've managed your assets, and they'll have a kind of like a checklist, you could say, of what they want, what they're looking for, and they'll go through that list and ask you all these questions. Do you have this? Have you show me where this is? Demonstrate to me how you implement these controls. Okay, so you got to be in position to say, this is how we do it, this is where it is. If you can't show that, then that's when they'll start to write non-conformities or issues on the report, and you may not get I guess accredited for that particular standard. Okay, so within government, we need to comply with particular standards. And every industry is different, but it's the same concept. It's just a different level of standard that you will get, that you're going over. Adri?
Yeah, so I think one more question for you, John, because that's a very important question for people looking to get into this space. So how do they highlight transferable skills on their CV to get noticed by the employer? Suppose that you're coming from a different background. What would be a strategy that people can use to, or I think the first question is, what are the transferable skills? And second, how do you highlight those on your CV?
Okay, so for me, just using myself as an example, I do previously, before my current role, I was looking after identity and access management. So kind of like you could say an application support and an implementer for that. I didn't really have any GRC skills back then. Like it was just basically support and controls. Okay, so that's the problem, what I did in the past. But how I transferred that onto my CV, I said, look, I looked after identity and access, I managed controls, and I implemented those controls. So it's more of a skill of not technical skills, Okay, it's those skills of, you know, how do I do things or what I've done. If you can show that on your CV, for example, particularly with IT and identity, you can actually get into the role. Because when you get into a GRC role, you're basically learning a lot of new stuff. Okay, it's not necessarily something you would have done previously, but you know, it does come down to a lot of you know, policy writing, a lot of understanding of compliance, report writing, all that kind of stuff as well. Adrian?
So is it fair to say that when you're doing a more technical role, you're doing the how, but when you jump into a governance, risk, and compliance role, it's more about the why.
Yeah.
Why we doing something? Is that a fair assumption?
It is. So it's why you're doing, because if you do it in a more technical role, you're doing it for a reason. You're doing some kind of control kind of works. You're not necessarily know the reasons behind it. Okay, so you're just doing it to, you know, you're fixing something basically. Okay.
Yeah,
Someone calls you, yep, I want this fixed. You do that. Okay,
you
but
just
when
do it.
you just do it. Okay, but when you go into GRC, you need to know the whys behind it. Okay, so if you can actually transfer that onto your resume, then easy. Okay, as I said, if you're an auditor, you already have these skills. Okay, you are going to be audited, okay, by the auditor, but when you're not being audited, you are the auditor for your organization. That's how I kind of look at it myself, because you're doing the checks and balances there.
Awesome. So
Next
one
question.
last
Yeah.
question from Edilson, and then we're gonna wrap up the session with John.
Thanks, guys. I think just adding a question related to how to highlight experience to transfer to governance and compliance. I think also it's like how we, for example, my background is support engineering, and I think I think I'm speaking from multiple attendance, which is I think the biggest challenge is like how can we have exposure, because sometimes when you work like a support engineer or something more technical, you wouldn't be able to to have exposure to that. So is there a way for us to have exposure to it, like even like a lab or a course or something like that to have more understanding in that regard?
Okay,
I hope that
so
makes sense.
yeah, I understand that. So as a support engineer, do you know if you have a GRC department within your organization?
We do have.
Okay, so that's probably a good step to get in. I'm not saying you go there and do work experience, but I would ask them what kind of compliance and regulations do they follow. Okay, what you would find is when you know what they've been forced to do, you can relate what you do as a support engineer in terms of development, in terms of what you deploy. That I'm pretty sure that you will see a relation where what you build complies to a particular control or regulation that they're trying to enforce within your organization. So once you understand that, because you probably have a standard that you follow when you do your work, okay, so that will link back to a particular standard or control where they're trying to enforce within your organization. You don't see that, okay, unless they audit you, unless they come knocking on your door and say, show me this, show me your work, are you doing it right? You don't see that, basically. But they probably have would have from the start laid down, I guess, an approach where you got to follow a particular standard, a way of how you work. Okay, so I would start off by maybe just checking with them first and see what kind of policies or standards they have, or what they're trying to enforce. And once you get that understanding, you will know that the work that you do will link back to one of those standards and controls. Okay, but there's not like a lab where, you know, if you, from a technical perspective, where you can practice GRC. I don't think there is. I haven't seen it. There's a lot of information online to, on what GRC is, policies and stuff, because people, while we write policies, we don't always do it day in, every day. Okay, it's something that we do refer to. If we don't have it, that's when we try to plug that gap and write one to fill in that control. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll quickly jump in just to add my bit to it. So a good exercise for you, Edilson, and everybody in this call is ask yourself, why do I do what I do, right? So, and that's gonna lead you towards the path of understanding why you're doing something in this space. So, for example, if you're in charge of managing firewalls, right? Let's say, just as an example. So why do I do that? So there is definitely either a policy that says we need to have a firewall in place, but or a risk that says there is a threat and we need to remediate that threat with a control, which is a firewall. So by asking the question, I think it's the start of walking that path of governance, compliance, and risk. So yeah, quick exercise. Just ask yourself why you do what you do, and reach out to your boss, to your team leader, and try to understand why you do what you do. So I think Rodrigo has a question as well.
Actually, it's not just more a question, but it's just adding my little thing here, because I think I was pretty similar as Edilson until like recently. And then now I'm working full-time as cybersecurity analyst. And one thing that it's helping me a lot, because I'm developing now the GRC skills. And one thing that it has been helping me a lot is being involved with cyber insurance forms. Like, this is the type of thing that they come really tricky, short, and straightforward questions that make you think a lot. Like things like, okay, all your network traffic is encrypted. And then you start to think, okay, from the workstation to the application, what happened if something it's not encrypted? Why it must be encrypted? What is the difference of, am I trafficking some kind of private personal information? And yeah, what happened if there's a man in the middle getting this information? So these insurance forms, it make like on my mind.
Very good point. And that's basically compliance, right? Compliance to an insurance policy, because the more you do align with the policy, the less you pay, right? So the less premium you pay. So that does make sense. So I see Sarah is writing a message. So John, let's see if she says something. If not, I will wrap this up, because we have a quick exercise to go through. But the topic is quite interesting. So, okay. So can you see Sarah's question, John?
Let me bring that up.
Okay, I'll read it out loud. So, John, would you say experience in the NFP sector management delivers good transferable skills for GRC? Just considering the report writing, compliance, and balance between organization and government requirements, etc. So, what's NFP, Sarah? I don't know that.
Yeah, I was about to ask what was NFP.
Not for profit. Okay.
Okay. Just getting the report writing, clients, machine organization, government requirements. Okay. It doesn't really matter, I would say. As I said, if you have those skill sets, so I would say if you have the skill sets and to writing reports, understanding, once you read a particular a standard, and you can transfer that skill into the organization, you'll do quite well. As I said, if you have that auditing background, where you understand what the auditor will look for when they audit you, and you can also, if you understand that, because you can bring that skill into your organization, because you will do the same thing when you work for an organization. You will, in a sense, be auditing your own organization. You'll be doing those checks and balances. Do we have this? Are we doing what we say we are doing? Okay. Do you have all these controls in place? Those are the kind of skill sets that if you were to get into GRC, those are the main, I guess, sticking points when you do this particular role. So hopefully that you want to understand that. So if you've got another question.
Awesome.
Sarah,
Thank you, John. So she's just saying, cheers, John. I hadn't considered GRC previously and spiked my interest. So understanding the parameters and expectations and bringing that self-awareness. So thank you for sharing your knowledge, John. So guys, a round of virtual applause for John. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. If this is a topic that you guys want to learn more about, we're happy to bring John in for another session in the future. Yeah. John, thank you so much for making the time. We are about to jump into a practical exercise. You're more than welcome to stay with us, but I wouldn't be heartbroken if you leave.
That's all right. I'm going to hit the gym, actually. It's a day off.
Good on you. Good on you. Awesome. Thank you very much,
thank
John.
you, guys. Thank you. See you, guys.
Cool.
Bye.
Thanks,
awesome.
See you, bye.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've learned quite a lot from John, so it's been great. But now, for those who have been with us in the last mentoring session, we had a bit of a homework, so we quite tight on time. But let's quickly go through it. For those who were not around, what we did was we created a scenario, and there is a little description about the scenario here about my precious. And we did a quick exercise to understand what are the crown jewels for this particular business. And in this example, they want to go online and to sell jewelry online. So what are the actual threats that they face? And what would be the severity of those threats to their business, right? So we're just trying to understand why we need to embed information/cybersecurity into a business. So we had this 5x5 risk matrix here, and the ask from last week was go through each one of these crown jewels and mark them down as how important they are from a risk perspective. If something happens to, for example, their payment system or the personal data and so on and so forth. So I'm not too sure who was here last week. Raise your hand if you're here with us last week or the week before last. It would be good for us to understand. Oh, Sarah was with us. Sarah, do you want to share a little bit, if you can, because I know you're commuting, of how you classified your threats and the severity for each one of the crown jewels for us? If you if you're not able, that's all good. Okay, she's typing. Let's give her a second or two. Oh no, all good. So she's jumping in a car. So we will leave these for next week as well. So for those of you who just joined, so this is your first time, something for you to go through. I'm happy to share this slide deck with you, so you can go through the scenario. But what we wanted to do for this session is, thank you, Sarah. So apart from the severity for each one of these crown jewels, I need you guys to also think about some of the threat actors. So who are the bad people that would be targeting each one of these, the crown jewels, right? And also, what are the attack vectors that they would use to exploit each one of these crown jewels here. So we still have 12 minutes. Let's open the mic and you guys tell me, even if you're not here last time, but just by looking at the threats, the crown jewels, what would be some of the threat actors against each one of them? Who's going to be first? Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
I can be first.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, I used to work in a jewelry shop, so
Oh, there you go.
all right. So with the payments, the threat actors can be internal and external. So internal, if the jewelry shop handle the cash, then yeah, it's gotta be easy for them to to get to steal the money, or even the electronic transactions, so they can do the refund, not to the customer. They just tap their phone, their credit card to refund to themselves.
Awesome. That's a great example. Thank you. Thank you. What about the rest, Bill? Okay, Rodrigo, jump in. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I think just adding another technique that it can be used by, especially if it's an internal threat. I would say the internal threat using actually a fake point of sale machine. So the user believes that he's paying for the jewelry on the valid point of sale, and then actually it's a third party one that the internal threat is using to steal the money.
Sorry, I don't know what happened here.
Yeah.
Are we all back?
Yeah. Did you hear, guys?
I apologize. Can you repeat yourself?
Yeah. So like I was telling that I think another internal threat, it's an internal employee that is unhappy, and then he's actually working with a fake point of sale machine.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the client believes he's paying for the jewelry. Okay, don't worry, you can come collect in 2 weeks or whatever, or here. And the money is just going for this third part point of sale account.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very good. So what about, so we looking mostly from an e-commerce point of view, right? So these guys, for those who don't have context, they have a jewelry shop. They're building their website to have an online presence and make sales online as well. So try to look at it from an online perspective. What would be some of the threats, the actors, where they come from, and the attack vectors as well?
Could be a poison DNS, or I forgot the term, like when they change slightly the domain.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
To replicate the site.
Yeah, I spoofed domain, let's say.
Spoofed domain,
So let's
yeah.
say if what Rodrigo is referencing to is, for example, let's say Tiffany and Co. Let's say someone creates a domain like Tiffany with let's say with an I instead of a Y, and they basically replicate the website. So people think they're actually purchasing jewelry from the right website, but they're actually on a fake website, right? So is that what you're referring to, Rodrigo?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Fernando also mentioned type squatting, which is basically what we discussed, right? So someone creating a website with a very similar domain name, and yes, misleading people to use that. Sorry, Edilson, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I think there's the classic phishing one, which let's say the customer went through the website for some reason didn't or did finish the purchase, and then a threat actor would send an email to the user saying, look, you haven't finished your purchase, you haven't paid properly, so please click on this link SIP, otherwise you're not going to be able to finalize your purchase. So phishing will be one of those as well.
Phishing, yeah, that's a great one. Is that only for the transaction, or is it for personal data as well?
Absolutely.
I would say,
Sorry.
you go, Rodrigo. You go.
Yeah, I would say they could even use like a fake hot site to collect all the information, like profile, like it's a gallery, right? So probably they're gonna can collect a lot of, okay, where's your incoming? So we can customize the offers to you. Where do you live? So we can point the closest shop to you, and then start to build the whole profile. And from a gallery, it can become another type of attack. So
Very good point. Very good point. Anyone else? I'm actually updating the slide, but the slide does not update as we go, unfortunately. And when I tried to refresh it, it broke the connection. It dropped us. So I'm not going to try to refresh the screen again. But from an intellectual property, what would be a threat actor and an attack vector that would probably cause some drama to this organization?
internal threat, selling to some concurrent, some like selling
Yeah.
the Coke recipe to Pepsi.
Yeah, excellent. So selling, let's say, business secrets to competitors. Yeah, I'm updating the slide deck, but it's not updating on the screen. But once you guys um, hit the slide deck, it's going to be there. So I'm typing it in as you speak. So from a site availability perspective, what would be a threat actor and what would be the attack vector to affect the site availability? The website, I mean.
Could be a denial of service attack.
Perfect. Denial of service.
Could
Who
be
would
a
be the
DNS.
perpetrator? Who would be launching a denial of service attack against a jewelry?
Someone unhappy with the services, some competitor. It can go.
Customer, competitors. Yeah, very good point. So I used to work for a cybersecurity consulting business more than 20 years ago. And it was early days for them, still back in Brazil. And they were one of the very first in Brazil. And these guys got attacked, like a denial of service attack that lasted like 2 or 3 weeks. And we're just wondering why, right? Like, why would you attack a small business like us? And every evidence led us to believe it was a competitor launching, not properly, I would say, they were not launching the attack, but they were um, influencing people to do so. So they basically wanted to put the website, to bring the website down. So when you're doing a search for security services, and if you click on that link and the link is unavailable, that two things happen, right? One, you're probably losing a business, and second, it looks bad on you, right? So I've seen it happening even at smaller scales. So you're completely right. So from a delivery and transport point of view, so you bought something online, what would be some of the threat actors and the attack vectors that this business could be affected by? Any takers?
Could be the delivery guy knowing, like a contractor, casual, knowing that, oh, I'm collecting this good from a jewelry. Yeah, cool. I'm gonna
What's in
fake
this
the
box?
process. Yeah, what's in this box? And oh, okay, it's shining. So maybe I'm gonna have the whole month just selling this by half price on marketplace. Here we go.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say if they swap the products, something, let's say legit, with something fake, right? So the end customer would still get, let's say, a product that looks quite similar to the original, but it's an actual fake. So attack vector would be, let's say, parcel tampering. Sorry, Fernando, do you want to jump in?
Oh, yeah. So I would say, in a more advanced perspective of an external actor, I just was figuring out on my mind right now. So maybe, for example, if the hackers has access to the system and they can change the address of delivering the product, right?
Perfect.
Or could be even like that type of case that someone buy the product is delivery, but then like the actor would say like, no, I never received this. I demand like a refund, or I demand another one, or I'm going to cause a big chaos with social media and blah 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 blah.
Repudiation.
Repudiate. Thank you.
Excellent. So you guys are hitting the nail in the head. So you're doing quite well. And what the exercise is going to be for next week. So I'm going to share what I've typed so far with you all. But the exercise for next week is, what are the proposed controls to remediate or to reduce or to eliminate some of these risks, right? So something for you guys to spend 5-10 minutes on. Next week, we before we start the session, we go through your feedback or your ideas. We add it to this table as well. So we progressively build a whole picture of the business, the threats, the actors, and the control. So you see, we're building these step by step, and that's the purpose of the exercise. And that goes back to, I think, John's point on why do we do what we do, right? And this is basically a roadmap. Why do we, let's say, get a signature when people are receiving my product, right? We ask for a signature, a physical signature. And by doing that, you can trace it back to a threat, you can trace it back to a risk, right? What's the risk that is being mitigated by someone physically signing the delivery of a product? I hope that makes sense. So that's the idea of the exercise, is to promote discussion, learn together, challenge each other. And I think you guys are doing quite well. Awesome. Anyone has anything else to add to what we've discussed so far? You're right on time. So if no questions, no comments, I'm going to wrap this up for today. I would like to thank you all for participating, for raising your questions, and I hope you've learned something from this session. Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you. Thank you, Dre.
No worries.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all, and hopefully see you in the next session.
See you guys in the next
Thank
session.
you.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.